Howdy, we are back for another study in the Gospel of Mark. We are in Mark chapter 14, and today we're going to start around verse 27. And what we see in the last three chapters of Mark is the arrest, the betrayal, the crucifixion, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. The shorter way to say that is Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. And so, just trying to get my slides in order here. And okay. My plan is to get through chapter 14, but we are going to see how much of this that we can cover. If we have to spend one more class in chapter 14, that will be just fine too. But let's sing a couple songs here, and then we will get started with our study or class. Okay. Let's sing Only in Thee. Only in Thee, O Savior mine, dwelleth my soul, and peace divine, peace that the world of all combined never can take.
I'm gonna be crying in the bedroom, just so you know.
Okay. From me. Hush of first so seemingly sweet, held the last one longing to me. Only in Thee my bliss is complete. Only You, Lord, in Thee. Only in Thee, how radiant bright, shines like a beacon in the night, guiding my pilgrims bark of light over the trackless sea. Only in Thee, when troubles will last, when in temptation I am oppressed, there is a sweet pavilion of rest. Only You, Lord, in Thee. Sorry. Only in Thee, dear Savior, sweet, losing my life, my own to gain. Trusting mine cleansed from every stain, thou art my only plea. Only in Thee my heart will delight, when the land where cometh no night, faithful be lost in heavenly sight. Only to Lord in thee. And then the song before we start our study will be Jesus, Keep Me Near the Cross. Jesus, keep me near the cross. There's a precious fountain, free for all, a healing stream flows by from Calvary's mountain. In the cross be my glory ever, till my happy soul shall find rest beyond the river. Near the cross a trembling soul, love and mercy found me. There the bright and morning star shed its beams around me. In the cross be my glory ever, till my happy soul shall find rest beyond the river. Near the cross, O Lamb of God, bring its scenes before me. Help me walk from day to day with its shadows o'er me. In the cross, be my glory ever, till my happy soul shall find rest beyond the river. Alright, if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn them to the book of Mark. That has been our focus for the study. And like I said, we are in Mark chapter 14, starting in verse 27. And really what we're dealing with in chapters 14, 15, and 16 is the circumstances in which Jesus dies and is buried and raised. 14 deals with his death. If you would remember, we've been pointing out every week at the beginning of our study that we are in Jesus' last week on earth. And so Mark makes this distinction in Mark chapter 11 that he set his face to Jerusalem. And so Jesus is in Jerusalem, and during his time in Jerusalem, we've seen him have pretty deep theological teachings and meaningful meaningful challenges with the with the leaders of that day. And so the height and the suspense is building. And I want to point this out. If you have noticed, the tone of Mark is very fast. We've read it earlier. He capitalizes on words like immediately. This happened, then this happened, and then this happened. Now Mark is slowing down in these last 3 chapters and telling us all the details regarding Jesus and his death, burial, and resurrection. And so the fact that Mark slows down for this tells us that there's something that needs to be paid attention to here. And so, with all that set up, we are now ready to continue. And just a little bit of a review. Some of this is new. We haven't taken a look at this. But in regards to the outline, and excuse me a moment. Okay. And so, in regards to the outline, we see the chief priests plot that they want to kill Jesus in verses 14 through verses 1 through 2, and they want to kill Jesus, but they don't want to kill him right now because it's the Passover, lest there is an uproar. And then verses 3 through 9, we saw that Mary, a woman, Mark's account tells us a woman anointed Jesus. John's account in John 11 tells us that Mary anointed Jesus. And so we see that. And we also see the developing hard heart of Judas in that some of them, verse 4 says, "Why was this fragrant oil wasted? For it might have been sold for more than 3 denarii and given to the poor." Thus they criticized her sharply. And we learn from John's account, I think it's John 12, that Judas is the one that kind of leads this discussion and dispute, because he's been greedy with the money. And this whole setup leads us to the arrest, the betrayal of Jesus, because it's already apparent what kind of heart that Judas has here. And so in verses 14, in chapter 14, 10, and 11, Judas agrees to betray Jesus. 12 through 21, we see the very similar to chapter 11. Jesus gives his disciples commands in which they could celebrate the Passover with him. And then in verses 22 through 25, this is where we left off from last week, is Jesus instituting the Lord's Supper. And there's an important thread that I forgot to mention. During the Passover, it is revealed to the disciples whom Jesus is with that someone will betray him, and so that, of course, raises questions, right? Is it I? Is it I? Will I betray you, Jesus? And so that kind of builds. And so what we're going to see first in 26 through 31 is Jesus predicts Peter's denial and the prayer in the garden. And so let's first look at verses 27 through 31. Then Jesus said to them, all of you will be made to stumble because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I have been raised, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter said to him, even if all are made to stumble, yet I will not be. Jesus said to him, as surely as he said to you that today, even this night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he spoke more vehemently, if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. And they all said likewise. And so there was already been an uproar of the disciples when Jesus had said, one of you will betray me. And then in verse 19 they say, is it I? Is it I? Now Jesus reveals, all of you will be made to stumble because of me. And this actually fulfills a prophecy here. I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. And so that's what happens in literally, right? When the shepherd is struck, the sheep don't know where to go. They have no direction. The shepherd gives the sheep direction, and so they gather, right? And so this is taken from, let's see here, 14:27. This is taken from Zechariah 13:7, which is talking about the good shepherds of Israel versus the bad shepherds of Israel. And look what Zechariah says. Zechariah 13:27. And this is going to be another theme throughout these 3 chapters. A lot of prophecy will be fulfilled by Jesus. Zechariah 13. Sorry, my pages are sticking. Zechariah 13:7. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, against the man who is my companion. Strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. Then I will turn my hand against the little ones. And so Israel is going to be cut off here And so this is where it's fulfilled. And then Peter, bold Peter, impulsive Peter, on many occasions, like the Transfiguration and rebuking Jesus in chapter 10 when he predicts his death, burial, and resurrection, he says, even if all are made to stumble, yet I will not be. And Jesus said, surely I say to you, today, even this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And so Jesus says, no, Peter, you will deny me. But being Peter, he says, if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. And they also do likewise. So they start this night strong. They start off by saying, even if I have to die with you, I'll go that far. But it's a lot harder when confronted with the situation, as we'll see toward the end of our study, Lord willing, today, maybe next week, we'll see. And so, is there any thoughts or comments to verse 31? Okay. And so now they're in the Garden of Gethsemane. And so, let's read verses 32 through 42. Then they came to the place which was named Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. And when he took Peter, James, and John with him, he began to be troubled and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch. He went a little farther and fell on the ground and prayed that if it was possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, our Father, all things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will. Then he came and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, Simon, are you sleeping? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Again he went away and prayed, and he spoke the same words. And when he returned, he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. Then he came the third time and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? It is enough. The hour has come. Behold, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. And so Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's distressed, he's troubled, he knows exactly what's going to happen there. He's going to be betrayed, and so he wants a little distance, but he takes Peter, James, and John farther. He says to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And then he took Peter, James, and John farther. Peter, James, and John seem to be uh seem to be one of Jesus's inner disciples. That they are the ones that experience his most intimate moments, it seems like. You think about back in chapter, I believe it would be 9, 9 and 10 here. Back in chapter, uh, let's see, where Jesus is on this Mount of Mark chapter 9, when Jesus is on the Mount of Transfiguration, it's Peter, James, and John. And so, if you look, Mark chapter 9 and verse 2, it says, "Now after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, led them up on a high mountain apart by themselves, and he was transfigured before them." And so he takes these three innermost disciples and they go a little farther. And then he says, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay and watch for me." I think maybe he was watching for his accuser. And so this is, Jesus knows what he's about to do, and it's weighing heavy on him. Now, notice the language. "My soul is vexed, even to death." And so he goes even farther. So you got the disciples back here, the three inner disciples, and then Jesus. He goes a little farther and prays if it is possible the sorrow might pass from him. Now some have been confused because that they question, well, didn't Jesus want to die for us? That's why he came down. Yes, that's God's plan. But we have to remember that Jesus took on humanity. This was going to be a painful death, and so he prayed that this cup might not pass. Prayed that this cup might pass away from him. He says, if there's any other way, let's do that, Father. But not my will, but your will. And so, even now, he wants a way out, if it's possible, but he is still about the Father's will. If you remember in John 2, when Jesus was at the temple, he says that I must be about my Father's business. Well, even now, even when he's asking to get out of this situation, he's asking for the Father's will. And so after that encounter with the Father, Luke records in Luke 24 that he was strengthened by an angel and this was an intense moment. Sweat was dripping like blood. And so this is intense pleading with the Father. He knew uh, he knew what would be the full brunt of force behind what he's going to do. He knew the pain, the mocking, and the ridicule. He even described it in chapter uh, in chapter 10. He describes this. Look at verse 33. Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles. And notice the details in verse 34, chapter 10. They will mock him and scourge him and spit on him and kill him. On the third day he will rise again. Jesus was fully aware of what was going to happen. And so you would think in this hard time everybody would be supportive, right? Well, he comes out and finds the disciples sleeping. Could you not watch for 1 hour? It's late. I'm sure the disciples wanted to stay up, but their eyes were heavy. Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And then they do it a second time. And they say, they fall asleep that second time. And then Jesus says, are you still sleeping and resting? It is enough. The hour has come. Behold, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayers at hand. And so he is strengthened by this angel according to Luke. He is ready to comply fully with the will of God. He gives his disciples up. And next in this chapter, we're going to see verses 43 through 50 is a betrayal and arrest, and 51 through 65, Jesus facing the Sanhedrin, and then Peter's denial and weeping. And so I want to get through this here. Jesus is going to be in this mock trial, and so verses 43 through 50. And immediately while he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and scribes and the elders. Now his betrayer had given him a signal, saying, whoever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him and lead him away safely. As soon as he had come, immediately he went up to him and said, Rabbi, Rabbi, and kissed him. And they laid hands on him and took him. And one of those who stood by drew his ear and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Then Jesus answered and said to them, have you come out against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. but the scripture must be fulfilled. Then they all forsook him and fled. And so it happens while he's speaking, a multitude comes with, notice, Judas is leading him, the one who betrayed him back in verse 10 and 11, and they come with clubs and swords, and Judas has the signal, the one who I kiss, seize him and take him away safely. So this is planned out. We're going to do this discreetly because you think it's dark. Jesus is not necessarily identifiable. And as soon as he had kissed him, immediately he said to him, Rabbi, Rabbi, teacher, teacher. That must have been a sad moment. Rabbi, Rabbi. And then they laid their hands on them and took him. And this is also a fulfillment of prophecy elsewhere in the Old Testament that he was going to be betrayed by a kiss. And so, verse 47, one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Well, Matthew tells us it was Peter. Peter is the one, if you notice, in verse 31, he says, but he spoke more vehemently, if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. And so now we see Peter actually owning up here to his claim that he's not going to deny Jesus no matter what. He is willing to fight, drop the sword, cut off the ear of the high priest, Malchus, Matthew tells us. And so Jesus heals him. Jesus answered and said to them, have you come out against me as a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. Do they know who Jesus was? And so Jesus says, I was with you. Why are you just now? Don't you know that I'm not a threat? I'll come with you. And so the scripture must be fulfilled. That all forsook him and fled. And so you did not seize me in public, taking a stab at their hypocrisy here. They were too ashamed to seize him in public because of the people. They fear the people on multiple occasions. And so Mark is the only one that gives us this little fact here. Mark 14:51 and 52. Now a certain young man followed him, having a leathern cloth around his body, and the young man laid hold of him, and he left the linen cloth and fled from them naked. Some say this is Mark inserting himself here, like I thought as well, but we don't know who this is. Interesting what Mark does here. And so when we come to verses 53 through 65, we see kind of this mock trial. And so let's go over this. And they led Jesus away to the high priest, and with him were assembled all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes. But Peter followed him at a distance. Notice he followed at a distance, right in the courtyard of the priest, and sat with the servants and warmed himself in the fire. Now the chief priests and all the council sought testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. They wanted counsel, but they could not find anything. This is a direct fulfillment of Isaiah 53. No deceit was found in Jesus' mouth. For many bore false witness against them, but their testimonies did not agree, for some rose up and bore false witness against him, saying, We heard him say, I will destroy this temple made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another without hands. But not even then did their testimony agree. And the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, Do you answer nothing? What is these men testify against you? And so the high priest is wanting Jesus to defend himself. Notice, they needed witnesses, but they couldn't find any thing to convict them, and so they gave false witnesses against Jesus, but they didn't agree. And so when asked, defend yourself, he kept silent, answering him nothing. Again, the high priest asked him, Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? Jesus said, I am. And you will see the Son of Man at the right hand of power, and coming in the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, What further need do we have of witnesses? You've heard. Then some began to spit on him and blindfold him and beat him and say to him, Prophesy. And the officers struck him with the palm of their hands and the blasphemy. What do you think? And they all condemned him to be deserving of death. And now they got Jesus right where they want him. They got him to admit that Jesus is the Son of God. And he says, You will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power, coming in the clouds of heaven. A reference to his final return, I think. And so that's it. And so meanwhile, verses 66 to 72, Peter was in the courtyard. Well, let's read it. Now as Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came, and when Peter And when she saw Peter warming herself, she looked at him and said, "You also were with Jesus of Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "Neither know nor understand what you are saying." And he went on the porch, and the rooster crowed, and the servant girls saw him, and began to say to those who were by, "This is one of them." But he denied it. And a little later, those who stood by said to Peter again, "Surely you are one of them. You are a Galilean. Your speech shows this." Then began Then he began to curse and swear, "I do not know this man whom you speak." The second time the rooster crowed. Then Peter called to mind the words that Jesus said, "Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And when he thought about it, he wept. And so now we see Peter denying Jesus three times. He's by the outer court warming himself. He denies Jesus. He denies him again. The servant girl says this is one of them. And the last girl says, "Your speech shows it. Your speech gives it away. This is one of them," and he denies knowing Jesus. Imagine that. Matthew 10:32 says, "If you deny me before men, I will deny you before my Father in heaven." And so Peter is denying Christ. But then he is repentant. The rooster crows, he thinks about the words of Jesus and weeps bitterly. And that's the difference between Peter and Judas. Peter saw the rooster crowing and remembered and wept, and he turned away. Judas, later on in Acts, actually in another account we read that he hung himself. And so Peter messed up, yes, but he fixed it. He corrected it. This is the same Peter that says, "I will never deny you." But he did. Well, notice again, verse 31. He spoke more vehemently, "If I have to die with you, I will not deny you." And they all said likewise. And so this just shows how our situations might change our attitude. So we gotta be careful that we mean what we say. We got through Mark 14. We're going to talk about chapter 15 next week. The crucifixion. So thank you all for joining us, and see you all next week. God bless.